The moment Lily Norwood stepped out of the weathered cabin into the biting December wind of 1876, she knew she had made a terrible miscalculation about how much firewood she would need to survive the winter in Alpine, Texas. The stack she had so carefully rationed since September was now reduced to perhaps 3 days' worth, and the temperature had dropped so suddenly that ice crystals formed on the inside of her windows each morning. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and surveyed the barren landscape surrounding her small homestead, wondering how she could have been so foolish as to think she could manage this land alone after her father's death 6 months prior. The wind howled across the high desert terrain, carrying with it the scent of juniper and the promise of snow, rare but not impossible in this part of Texas. Lily's fingers trembled as she picked up one of the remaining logs from the pile near her door, not entirely from the cold. She was 22 years old and had never felt more alone or ill-equipped for the life circumstances had thrust upon her. Her father, Thomas Norwood, had been a retired surveyor who had claimed this land 3 years ago, dreaming of a peaceful retirement, raising a few cattle and living off the land. But a sudden fever had taken him before he could teach Lily everything she needed to know about survival out here. She carried the log inside and placed it carefully in the stone fireplace, watching as the flames eagerly consumed the dry wood. At this rate, by Christmas she would be without heat, and the nearest town was a 4-hour wagon ride away. The thought of freezing to death in this isolated cabin made her stomach clench with fear. She had neighbors, theoretically, but the nearest homestead was the Lockhart Ranch, 3 miles to the east, and she had only seen riders from there a handful of times in passing. Lily spent the morning taking inventory of her other supplies. She had plenty of dried beans, some cornmeal, a few precious jars of preserves she had put up in the summer, and a small supply of coffee that she had been hoarding like gold. Her 2 chickens were still laying sporadically, and she had enough feed for them through February if she was careful. But none of that mattered if she froze to death before spring arrived. By midday, she had made a decision. She would have to venture out to the dry creek bed about a mile from her cabin where dead cottonwood trees sometimes fell. It was not ideal firewood. Cottonwood burned fast and gave off less heat than oak or mesquite, but it was better than nothing. She dressed in her warmest clothes, which consisted of her father's old wool coat over her dress, thick stockings, and sturdy boots that had belonged to her mother years ago. She took her father's hatchet, a length of rope, and the small wagon she usually used for hauling supplies. The walk to the creek bed was brutal. The wind cut through even the thick wool coat, and Lily had to stop several times to catch her breath and warm her hands under her arms. When she finally reached the area where fallen trees usually accumulated after storms, her heart sank. The few pieces of wood scattered about were either too green to burn well or already rotting. She spent an hour searching, managing to collect only enough small branches to perhaps last her one cold night. Tears of frustration stung her eyes as she loaded the pitiful collection into her wagon. This was not enough. This was nowhere near enough. She sat down on a large rock, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of her situation. She had been so determined to keep her father's land, to prove to the lawyer in town who had handled the estate that she could manage on her own. Pride had kept her from asking for help, from admitting that she was struggling. Now that pride might cost her everything, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up sharply. A man on a dark bay horse was riding toward her, leading a pack mule behind him. As he drew closer, Lily stood up, instinctively brushing the tears from her cheeks and straightening her spine. She recognized him vaguely from town, one of the men who worked at the Lockhart Ranch. He was tall, with dark hair visible beneath his wide-brimmed hat, and wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, chaps over his trousers, a heavy canvas coat, and spurs that jingled softly as his horse walked. "Afternoon, madam," the man called out as he approached, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. "You all right out here?" Lily bristled slightly at the concern in his voice, her pride flaring up again. "I'm perfectly fine, thank you, just collecting firewood." The man glanced at the sparse collection of branches in her wagon, then at the hatchet in her hand, and something shifted in his expression. It was not pity exactly, but a kind of understanding that made Lily's defenses waver slightly. "Name's Isaac Larson," he said, dismounting from his horse with an easy grace. "I work for the Lockhart Ranch. You're Thomas Norwood's daughter, aren't you? I heard about his passing. I'm real sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Lily said quietly, some of the fight going out of her. "Yes, I'm Lily Norwood. I've been managing his land since he died." Isaac looked around at the barren creek bed, then back at Lily's wagon. "If you don't mind me saying, madam, cottonwood isn't going to do you much good this winter. Burns too fast. You need oak or mesquite if you're going to keep a cabin warm through these cold spells." "I'm aware of that," Lily said, her voice sharper than she intended, "but this is what's available." Isaac nodded slowly, seeming to consider something. "I was just heading back to the ranch. We've got plenty of cut wood stacked up near the bunkhouse, more than we'll need. I'd be happy to bring you some." Lily's first instinct was to refuse. She had already accepted so much charity from various townspeople after her father's death, casseroles and condolences that had made her feel like an object of pity. But as another gust of cold wind whipped across the creek bed, she forced herself to swallow her pride. "I couldn't possibly impose," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's no imposition," Isaac replied. "Got to do something with it anyway. We overestimated how much we'd need this year. Would you mind if I brought some by later this afternoon?" Lily found herself nodding before she could overthink it. "That would be very kind of you. Thank you, Mr. Larson." "Just Isaac is fine," he said with a slight smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I'll be by before sundown." He tipped his hat again and mounted his horse, riding off toward the east before Lily could say anything else. She stood there for a moment, watching him disappear over the rise, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. She had been so determined to manage everything herself, but the relief that flooded through her at the prospect of having proper firewood was undeniable. Lily hauled her meager collection of branches back to the cabin, her mind occupied with thoughts of Isaac Larson. She tried to remember if she had seen him in town before, but her memories of the past few months were a blur of grief and struggle. She thought he might be around her age, perhaps a few years older, and there had been a steadiness about him that she found oddly comforting. True to his word, Isaac arrived at her cabin just as the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. But Lily was completely unprepared for what she saw when she opened her door at the sound of wagon wheels. Isaac had not brought a small stack of firewood. He had brought an entire wagon load of split oak and mesquite, enough to last her through the entire winter and possibly into spring. "Mr. Larson, I can't possibly accept all this," Lily protested, stepping out onto her small porch. Isaac was already unloading logs, stacking them with practiced efficiency near her cabin. "Already loaded it up," he said simply. "Seems a shame to haul it all back now, but this is far too much. I have no way to pay you for this." Isaac paused in his work and looked at her directly. His eyes were a warm brown in the fading light, and there was no trace of judgment or expectation in them. "I'm not asking for payment, Miss Norwood. Sometimes folks just need a hand. Your father would have done the same for anyone on my ranch if the situation was reversed." That struck something deep in Lily's chest. Her father had been that kind of man, always willing to help a neighbor in need. She had been so caught up in her own pride and fear that she had forgotten that accepting help was not the same as admitting defeat. "At least let me offer you some supper," she said, her voice softer. "It's not much, just beans and cornbread, but it's the least I can do." Isaac seemed to consider this for a moment, then nodded. "That would be nice, thank you. Let me finish stacking this first." Lily went back inside and quickly set about preparing the simple meal, her hands moving automatically as she stoked the fire and put on a pot of beans she had been soaking earlier. She sliced thick pieces of cornbread she had made that morning and put on a pot of coffee. The cabin was small, just one main room with a sleeping area partitioned off by a curtain, but it was clean and tidy, and Lily found herself hoping Isaac would not find it too humble. By the time he knocked on the door again, she had the table set with 2 plates and steaming bowls of food. Isaac had removed his hat and brushed the wood chips from his coat, and Lily noticed for the first time that he was actually quite handsome, with strong features and a quiet dignity about him. "Please, sit down," she said, gesturing to the table. They ate in a comfortable silence at first, both hungry from the day's work. Finally, Lily found her voice. "How long have you worked at the Lockhart Ranch?" "About 5 years now," Isaac replied. "I started out as a regular hand, but I've been managing the cattle operations for the past year. It's good work, and the Lockharts are fair employers." "Do you have family around here?" Isaac shook his head. "My parents died when I was young. I grew up in an orphanage in San Antonio, then worked various ranches until I settled here. This is the closest thing I've had to a home in a long time." There was no self-pity in his voice, just a simple statement of fact, and Lily felt a kinship with this man who also knew what it was like to lose parents, to be alone in the world. "I know something about that," she said quietly. "My mother died when I was 12. It was just my father and me after that. When he died, I thought about selling the land and moving back east where I have some distant cousins, but something kept me here." "This land has a way of getting into your blood," Isaac said. "It's harsh, but there's a freedom here you don't find many other places." They talked until the coffee pot was empty and the fire had burned down to embers. Isaac told her about life on the ranch, about the cattle drives and the wild horses they sometimes spotted in the hills. Lily found herself telling him about her father's surveying work, about the maps he used to draw, and the stories he would tell about the changing landscape of Texas. It was the most she had talked to anyone in months, and she realized how desperately lonely she had been. When Isaac finally stood to leave, he paused at the door. "Miss Norwood, I know you're managing out here on your own, and I admire that. But if you ever need anything at all, the Lockhart Ranch is just 3 miles east. Don't hesitate to come by or send word." "Thank you, Isaac," Lily said, using his first name deliberately. "For the firewood and for the company, it meant more than you know." After he left, Lily stood at the window and watched his wagon disappear into the darkness. The pile of firewood stacked neatly beside her cabin seemed to glow in the moonlight, a tangible reminder that she was not as alone as she thought. The next morning dawned clear and cold, and Lily woke to a cabin that was actually warm for the first time in weeks. She had kept the fire burning through the night, no longer worried about rationing every log. As she dressed and went about her morning chores, she found her thoughts drifting repeatedly to Isaac Larson. There had been something about him, a kindness that seemed effortless, not performative or condescending. She wondered if she would see him again or if their encounter had been a one-time kindness. 3 days later, she had her answer. She was outside feeding her chickens when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Isaac rode up on the same bay horse, and this time he was carrying a large bundle wrapped in burlap. "Morning, Miss Norwood," he called out cheerfully. "Hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," Lily said, surprised by how happy she was to see him. "What brings you out this way?" Isaac dismounted and held up the bundle. "Brought you some supplies from town. I was there yesterday picking up feed for the ranch, and I thought you might be able to use some things before winter really sets in." Lily took the bundle, feeling its weight. Inside she found flour, sugar, dried apples, and a small sack of peppermint candies. "Isaac, this is too much." "You've already done so much. Consider it an investment in good cornbread," he said with a grin. "Yours was the best I've had in years. Besides, Mr. Lockhart gives us hands a supply budget. I never use all of mine." Lily laughed despite herself. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" "I'd like that very much." This became a pattern over the next several weeks. Isaac would stop by every few days, always with some excuse. Sometimes he brought supplies. Sometimes he claimed he was just checking the fence lines in the area. Lily began to look forward to these visits with an anticipation that surprised her. They would sit at her small table and talk for hours, about everything and nothing. Isaac was easy to talk to, patient and thoughtful, and he never made her feel foolish for not knowing things about ranching or survival that seemed obvious to him. One afternoon in mid-January, Isaac arrived to find Lily struggling with a broken shutter that had come loose during a windstorm the night before. Without being asked, he immediately set about fixing it, producing tools from his saddlebag with the ease of someone always prepared for any situation. "You're very handy to have around," Lily said, watching him work. "My pa, before he died, he was a carpenter," Isaac said, securing the shutter back into place. "He taught me a lot in the short time we had together. Said a man should know how to fix things, build things. It served me well." "I wish my father had taught me more practical things," Lily admitted. "He was so focused on his surveying work that he never thought to teach me how to really run this place. I think he assumed he would be around longer." Isaac climbed down from the small ladder he had been using and looked at her seriously. "I could teach you if you'd like. How to keep up with repairs, how to manage livestock if you decide to get any. It's not charity," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "It's just neighborly. And besides, I enjoy spending time here." The last part was said quietly, almost shyly, and Lily felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the winter sun. "I would like that very much." Over the following weeks, Isaac became a constant presence at Lily's homestead. He taught her how to properly mend fences, how to identify good timber for building, how to read the signs of changing weather in the clouds and wind. In return, Lily shared the books her father had collected over the years, reading aloud to Isaac in the evenings while he carved small wooden figures by the fireplace. She learned that despite his rough exterior and practical skills, Isaac had a deep love of stories and a quick mind that absorbed information like a sponge. "I never got much formal schooling," he admitted one evening as Lily finished reading a chapter from a novel about the sea. "The orphanage taught us basics, but mostly we learned trades. I've always wished I had more education." "You're one of the most intelligent people I've met," Lily said firmly. "Education is not just about books. You know things that would take scholars years to learn." Isaac looked at her with such warmth in his eyes that Lily felt her breath catch. Something was shifting between them, something neither of them had named yet, but that was growing stronger with each shared conversation, each comfortable silence. February brought a rare snowstorm to Alpine, and Lily woke one morning to find several inches of snow covering the ground. She was checking on her chickens, worried about them in the unusual cold, when she saw a figure trudging through the snow toward her cabin. It was Isaac, but instead of riding his horse, he was on foot, carrying a large sack over his shoulder. "What are you doing walking in this weather?" Lily called out, hurrying to meet him. Isaac's face was red from the cold, but he was grinning. "Horse threw a shoe yesterday. Couldn't wait to see if you were all right out here with this storm. You walked 3 miles in the snow just to check on me." "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds foolish," Isaac said, stomping the snow off his boots. "But yes." Lily felt something crack open in her chest, some last wall of resistance she had been holding on to. "Get inside before you freeze. I'll make hot coffee." Once Isaac was settled by the fire, wrapped in one of her father's old quilts and holding a steaming mug of coffee, Lily sat down across from him. The storm howled outside, but inside the cabin it was warm and cozy, made even more so by Isaac's presence. "Why did you really come?" she asked softly. "The truth." Isaac set down his coffee and looked at her directly. "Because I was worried about you. Because I've spent the last 2 months finding excuses to see you, and the thought of you being out here alone in a storm made me half crazy with concern. Because somewhere between fixing your shutter and listening to you read, I've fallen for you, Lily Norwood, and I couldn't stay away even if I wanted to." Lily's heart was pounding so hard she was certain Isaac could hear it. "I've fallen for you too," she whispered. "I've been afraid to admit it, even to myself. Everything has been so uncertain since my father died, and I didn't want to need anyone. But Isaac, I don't just need you, I want you in my life." Isaac stood and crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair and taking her hands in his. "I don't have much to offer. I'm just a ranch hand with no property of my own. But I would work my whole life to make you happy, to help you keep this land if that's what you want, or to start somewhere new if that's what you prefer. I love you, Lily. I think I've loved you since that day I found you at the creek bed, too proud to admit you needed help." Lily laughed, tears streaming down her face. "I love you too, and I don't need you to have property or wealth. You've already given me everything that matters. You've given me hope again and friendship and a reason to look forward to tomorrow." Isaac reached up and cupped her face gently, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "May I kiss you, please?" Lily breathed. When Isaac kissed her, it was gentle and sweet, full of promise and tenderness. Lily felt like she was coming home to a place she had not known she was searching for. They stayed there by the fire, holding each other as the storm raged outside, making plans and promises in quiet voices. The snow melted after a few days, but Isaac did not stop visiting. If anything, his presence at Lily's homestead became even more constant. He would finish his work at the Lockhart Ranch and then ride over to help Lily with her own chores, mending things that had fallen into disrepair during her father's illness and after his death. They worked side by side during the days and sat together by the fire in the evenings, and Lily found a contentment she had not known was possible. In March, Isaac approached Mr. Lockhart, the owner of the ranch where he worked, and asked for permission to court Lily properly and eventually marry her. Mr. Lockhart, a gruff but fair man in his 50s, had apparently been watching the developing relationship with approval. "About time you settled down, Larson," he said, clapping Isaac on the shoulder. "That Norwood girl has a good head on her shoulders. You have my blessing, and when you're ready to marry, I'll give you a bonus so you can start your life together right." Isaac could barely contain his excitement as he rode to Lily's cabin that evening. He found her in her small garden plot, turning over the soil in preparation for spring planting. "Lily," he called out, dismounting quickly, "I have something to ask you." Lily straightened up, brushing dirt from her hands, and smiled at the sight of him. "You look like you're about to burst. What is it?" Isaac took her hands, not caring about the dirt, and dropped to one knee right there in the garden. "I spoke to Mr. Lockhart today." I have his blessing, and I have a little money saved up. It's not much, but it's a start. Lily Norwood, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I promise to love you and care for you and work beside you for all the days of my life." Lily pulled him to his feet, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. I don't need money or grand gestures. I just need you, Isaac Larson. I need your kindness and your strength and your love." They were married on a bright April morning in 1877 in the small church in Alpine. It was a simple ceremony, attended by the Lockhart family, several ranch hands who had become Isaac's friends, and a handful of townspeople who had known Lily's father. Lily wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, and Isaac wore his Sunday best, which he had carefully cleaned and pressed. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed Lily with such tenderness that several of the ladies in attendance wiped tears from their eyes. Mr. Lockhart was true to his word, presenting Isaac with a generous bonus that allowed them to purchase some cattle and supplies to truly make Lily's homestead productive. But more than that, he offered Isaac a partnership of sorts, agreeing to provide grazing land and support in exchange for Isaac managing an expansion of the ranch operations. "You're one of the best cattlemen I've ever worked with," Mr. Lockhart told Isaac on his wedding day. "I want to keep you close, and I want to see you and your new wife succeed. This benefits all of us." Isaac and Lily settled into married life with an ease that felt natural, as if they had been together for years rather than months. Isaac moved into Lily's cabin, and together they began to expand and improve it. He built an addition to give them a proper bedroom and a larger kitchen. They built a small barn for the cattle and horses and fenced in more pasture land. The work was hard but satisfying, made easier by the fact that they did it together. At night, after the day's work was done, they would sit together on the porch Isaac had built, watching the sun set over the Texas hills. Isaac would tell Lily about his day, about the cattle, or any interesting things he had seen, and Lily would share her own news about the garden or the chickens or the letter she had received from her distant cousins back east. "You ever regret staying here?" Isaac asked her one evening, his arm around her shoulders. "Turning down the chance to go back east and live a more comfortable life." Lily leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and sage that always clung to his clothes. "Not for a single moment. This is where I'm meant to be. With you, building this life together. I've never been happier." As summer arrived and the land bloomed with wildflowers and grasshoppers sang in the heat, Lily discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening after supper, simply taking his hand and placing it on her still flat belly. "We're going to have a baby," she said softly, watching his face. Isaac's expression transformed from confusion to understanding to pure joy in the space of a heartbeat. He pulled Lily into his arms, holding her as if she was the most precious thing in the world. "A baby," he whispered. "We're going to have a family. Are you happy?" Lily asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Isaac said. "I never thought I would have this, a wife who loves me, a home of my own, and now a child. Lily, you've given me everything I ever dreamed of but never thought I deserved." "You deserve all of this and more," Lily said firmly, cupping his face in her hands. "You're going to be an amazing father." The pregnancy progressed well through the hot summer months. Isaac became even more protective and attentive, if that was possible. He insisted on doing the heavier chores and would not let Lily lift anything he deemed too heavy. When she complained that she was pregnant, not fragile, he would just kiss her forehead and ignore her protests. In the evenings, Isaac began building a cradle from oak wood, carving intricate designs into the headboard. Lily would sit nearby, sewing tiny clothes and blankets, both of them talking about their hopes and dreams for their child. They argued playfully about names, though they eventually agreed that if it was a boy, they would name him Thomas after Lily's father, and if it was a girl, they would name her Caroline after Isaac's mother. The Lockharts continued to be generous supporters and friends. Mrs. Lockhart, a kind woman in her 40s who had raised 3 children of her own, took Lily under her wing, teaching her what to expect during birth and early motherhood. She gave Lily a stack of baby clothes her own children had outgrown and promised to be there when the baby came. In late February of 1878, on a cold but clear night, Lily went into labor. Isaac rode like mad to fetch Mrs. Lockhart and the midwife from town while Lily tried to remain calm in the cabin. By the time they returned, her contractions were strong and close together. Isaac wanted to stay by her side, but Mrs. Lockhart firmly but kindly ushered him out of the bedroom area. "This is women's work, Isaac," she said. "You go pace and worry like men do, and we'll call you when you have a child to meet." It was the longest night of Isaac's life. He wore a path in the floorboards of his own cabin, starting at every sound from behind the curtain. He prayed more fervently than he ever had, promising God anything if Lily and the baby would just be all right. He heard Lily cry out several times, and it took all his willpower not to burst through the curtain. Finally, just as the sun was beginning to paint the sky pink, he heard the sound he had been waiting for. A baby's cry, strong and loud, filled the cabin. Moments later, Mrs. Lockhart emerged with a tired but radiant smile. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, beautiful boy, and Lily is tired but doing well. Come meet your son, Isaac." Isaac rushed past her, his heart pounding. Lily was propped up in bed, sweaty and exhausted but more beautiful than he had ever seen her. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. As Isaac approached, she pulled back the blanket to reveal a tiny face, red and scrunched but perfect. "Thomas Isaac Larson," Lily said softly, looking up at Isaac with tears in her eyes. "Your son." Isaac knelt beside the bed, reaching out with one finger to gently touch the baby's impossibly small hand. Thomas's tiny fingers immediately wrapped around Isaac's finger, and Isaac felt his throat tighten with emotion. "He's perfect," Isaac whispered. "You're both perfect. Lily, I love you so much. Thank you for him, for everything." Lily leaned her head against Isaac's shoulder, and together they stared down at their son, both overwhelmed by the miracle of this new life they had created together. The first few weeks with Thomas were exhausting but wonderful. Isaac had never been so tired or so happy in his entire life. He would wake in the night when Thomas cried, bringing the baby to Lily, and then staying awake with her, sometimes talking quietly, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. During the day, Isaac tried to keep up with the ranch work, but he found himself rushing through tasks so he could get home to his family. Mr. Lockhart was understanding, even amused by Isaac's distraction. "First child does that to a man," he said with a knowing smile. "Don't worry, Larson. You'll find your rhythm. Take the time you need." As Thomas grew from a tiny newborn into a robust infant, the Larson homestead continued to thrive. The small herd of cattle had grown, and they had purchased a few horses as well. Isaac's reputation as a skilled cattleman had spread, and other ranchers in the area sometimes consulted him on breeding and management issues. Lily's garden flourished, and she had started selling excess produce and preserves in town, adding to their modest but growing income. When Thomas was 6 months old, Lily and Isaac took him to town for the first time. As they walked down the main street, Lily pushing Thomas in a small pram that Isaac had modified from an old wagon, several townspeople stopped to admire the baby and chat. Lily realized with some surprise that she and Isaac had become respected members of the community, no longer seen as the lonely orphan and the struggling widow, but as a strong, capable couple building a good life together. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching Thomas play on a blanket at their feet, Isaac reached over and took Lily's hand. "You remember that day I found you at the creek bed?" he asked. Lily smiled. "How could I forget? I was so angry at myself, so scared. I thought my life was falling apart." "I think that was the best day of my life," Isaac said. "Not because you were struggling, but because it gave me the chance to meet you, to know you. If I had not been riding that way that day, if you had not needed help, we might never have crossed paths." "I think we would have found each other somehow," Lily said, squeezing his hand. "We were meant to be together. I believe that." Isaac lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, Lily Larson, more today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "That's beautiful," Lily said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Did you make that up?" "I've been thinking it for a while," Isaac admitted. "Just never said it out loud before." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Thomas babbled happily, playing with a wooden horse Isaac had carved for him. In the distance, they could hear cattle lowing and the wind rustling through the mesquite trees. It was a simple scene, but to both Isaac and Lily, it represented everything they had ever wanted. Over the next 2 years, their life continued to grow and flourish. Thomas became an active toddler, following his father around the property with unwavering devotion. Isaac proved to be as wonderful a father as Lily had predicted, patient and loving but firm when needed. He taught Thomas about animals and plants, about the importance of hard work and honesty, lessons Isaac had learned the hard way during his difficult childhood. In the spring of 1880, Lily discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news came with less surprise, but no less joy. Thomas was excited about the prospect of a sibling, though at 2.5, he did not entirely understand what it meant. The pregnancy was easier than the first had been, perhaps because Lily now knew what to expect, or perhaps because she had Isaac's steady presence and support every step of the way. This time, when she went into labor on a warm October evening, Isaac was calmer, though no less concerned. He stayed with Lily through most of the labor, only stepping out when the midwife insisted during the final stages. Their second child was indeed a girl, born with a lusty cry and a full head of dark hair. They named her Caroline Ruth, Ruth being Mrs. Lockhart's first name, a small tribute to the woman who had been such a help and friend to them. If Thomas had completed their family, Caroline perfected it. She was a happy baby with a quick smile and a curious nature. Thomas was fascinated by his little sister, always wanting to help care for her and entertain her. The cabin, which had once seemed too big and empty to Lily, now felt full of life and love and noise. The years passed quickly, as they do in happy times. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved working alongside his father with the cattle. Caroline proved to be fearless and adventurous, keeping Lily on her toes. Isaac expanded their operations, eventually becoming a full partner with Mr. Lockhart in a venture that covered several hundred acres. The original cabin was expanded twice, becoming a proper ranch house with multiple bedrooms and a large kitchen where Lily could cook for the occasional hired hands Isaac employed during busy seasons. In 1884, when Thomas was 6 and Caroline was 3, they welcomed their third child, another boy they named Samuel James. The James after a friend Isaac had made during his days working various ranches. Samuel was a quieter child than his siblings, thoughtful and gentle, content to sit and listen to his mother read or watch his father work. The Larson Ranch had become one of the most successful small operations in the area. Isaac's skill with cattle and his honest dealings had earned him respect from ranchers throughout West Texas. Lily had turned her talent with preserves and baking into a small business, selling goods to the general store in Alpine and to a few other towns within a day's ride. Together, they had built something lasting and good. But beyond the material success, what mattered most to both Isaac and Lily was the family they had created. On Sunday afternoons, when the work was done and the children were clean and dressed in their good clothes, the family would sometimes take picnics out to the old creek bed where Isaac and Lily had first met. The children would play in the shallow water while Isaac and Lily sat on the bank watching them. "You remember when I told you that this land gets into your blood?" Isaac asked one such afternoon, his arm around Lily's waist. "I remember," Lily said, leaning against him. "I did not really understand what you meant then. I do now." "We've built a good life here," Isaac said, watching Thomas help Caroline climb a low tree branch. "Better than I ever imagined possible." "We've built it together," Lily corrected. "That's what makes it good." As the sun began to set, painting the Texas sky in those familiar shades of orange and pink, Isaac gathered his children and helped them into the wagon for the ride home. Samuel fell asleep almost immediately, his head on Lily's lap. Thomas and Caroline chattered about the tadpoles they had seen and the smooth stones they had collected. Isaac drove the wagon slowly, in no hurry to end this perfect day. He looked over at Lily, her face soft in the fading light, one hand absently stroking Samuel's hair while she listened to Thomas and Caroline's excited voices. In that moment, Isaac was overwhelmed with gratitude for the simple act of kindness that had started everything, for the decision to chop extra wood for a woman who needed help, for the courage to admit he had fallen in love. That night, after the children were asleep in their beds, Isaac and Lily stood together on their porch as they had done countless times before. The stars were brilliant in the clear Texas sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "Isaac," Lily said softly. "Yes." "Thank you for stopping that day, for bringing me firewood, for not letting me be too proud to accept help." Isaac pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "Thank you for letting me help, for seeing past the rough cowboy exterior to the man underneath, for building this life with me." "I would choose you again," Lily said. "Every single time, in every possible life I would choose you." "And I would choose you," Isaac replied, "always." They stood there for a long while, holding each other under the vast Texas sky, listening to the peaceful sounds of their ranch settling in for the night. Inside, their 3 children slept soundly, safe and loved. The cattle were secure in their pastures, the horses were bedded down in the barn, and the larder was full of food Lily had preserved for the winter ahead. It was not a grand life by some standards. They would never be wealthy in terms of money, and their ranch would always be modest compared to some of the big operations in Texas. But in every way that truly mattered, they had everything. They had each other, they had their children, and they had this land that Isaac had been right about so many years ago. It had gotten into their blood, but more than that, they had poured their blood, sweat, and tears into it, and it had rewarded them with a good life. Years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of ranch life. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and interests. Thomas showed such an aptitude for ranching that by the time he was 14, he was handling responsibilities that would challenge some grown men. He had his father's steady temperament and his mother's sharp mind, a combination that served him well. Caroline, true to her early promise, grew into a spirited young woman who could rope and ride as well as any cowboy on the ranch. She had her father's determination and her mother's compassion, and she was fiercely protective of her younger brother Samuel, even as they both grew older. Samuel remained the quiet one, more interested in books and learning than cattle and horses, though he did his share of ranch work without complaint. He had a talent for numbers and helped his mother keep the accounts for both the ranch and her preserves business. At 12 years old, he announced his intention to become a teacher someday, and both Isaac and Lily supported this dream wholeheartedly. In 1892, when they had been married 15 years, Isaac surprised Lily with a trip to San Antonio. It was the first time either of them had left Alpine for anything other than business in years. They left the ranch in Thomas's capable hands, with the Lockharts keeping a watchful eye from their neighboring property. San Antonio was bustling and modern compared to Alpine, with electric lights in some buildings and paved streets. Lily was overwhelmed at first by the noise and the crowds, but Isaac held her hand and guided her through the city with surprising ease. He took her to a nice hotel, a luxury neither of them had ever experienced, and to a proper restaurant where they ate food they could not even pronounce. On their last evening in the city, as they walked along the river in the soft twilight, Isaac stopped and turned to face Lily. "Do you remember when I proposed to you?" he asked. "In your garden covered in dirt," Lily laughed. "How could I forget? It was perfect." "I never gave you a proper engagement ring," Isaac said, reaching into his pocket. "I couldn't afford one then, and afterward, it seemed like the money could always be better spent on the children or the ranch. But I've been saving, and I wanted to do this right." He pulled out a small box and opened it to reveal a simple but beautiful gold band with a small diamond set in it. "Lily Larson, you've been my wife for 15 years. You've given me children, built a home with me, and made every single day of my life better just by being in it. Would you accept this ring as a symbol of my continuing promise to love you for all the rest of our days?" Lily was crying, not caring that people walking by were staring at them. "Isaac Larson, you didn't need to do this. That you thought to do it means everything to me." She held out her left hand where she still wore the plain gold band he had placed there on their wedding day. "Put it on." Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger next to her wedding band and then pulled her into a kiss that was as passionate as it was tender. When they finally pulled apart, both had tears in their eyes. "I love you," Lily whispered, "more than words can ever express." "I love you too," Isaac replied. "Thank you for 15 years of happiness. Here is to 50 more." They returned to Alpine to find that the ranch had run smoothly in their absence and that their children had missed them terribly. Thomas tried to play it cool, but he hugged his father tight when they arrived home. Caroline launched herself at Lily with all the enthusiasm of her personality. Samuel, characteristically, simply took his parents' hands and said he was glad they were home. That evening, after the children were finally in bed and the excitement had died down, Isaac and Lily sat in their bedroom, which had expanded over the years from the small partitioned area to a proper room with a real door and windows that looked out over the land they had built their life on. "We've had a good life, haven't we?" Lily said, looking at the ring on her finger which caught the lamplight and sparkled. "The best," Isaac agreed. "And we're not done yet. We've got years ahead of us still." He was right. The years ahead brought both joys and challenges, as life always does. There were hard winters and dry summers, times when money was tight and times when it flowed more freely. There were illnesses that scared them and recoveries that relieved them. There were moments of friction between the children as they grew and found their own paths, and moments of perfect harmony when the whole family worked together in seamless synchronicity. In 1896, Thomas married a young woman named Alina from a neighboring ranch, and Isaac and Lily became grandparents when Alina gave birth to twin girls in 1897. Watching their son become a father, seeing Isaac hold his granddaughters with the same tender care he had shown his own children, Lily felt her heart might burst with happiness. Caroline, independent as always, announced at 18 that she wanted to travel before settling down. She spent 2 years working on various ranches across Texas and New Mexico, sending letters home that both worried and delighted her parents. When she finally returned, she had a confidence and worldliness that served her well when she eventually took over management of Lily's preserves business, expanding it beyond anything Lily had imagined. Samuel did indeed become a teacher, one of the first in Alpine to be formally trained at a normal school. He taught at the small schoolhouse in town and eventually married a fellow teacher, a kind woman named Margaret who shared his love of learning and books. They had one child, a son they named Isaac, after the grandfather who had always supported Samuel's dreams. Isaac and Lily watched their children flourish and build their own lives with the same pride and love they had poured into raising them. But even as the family expanded and grew, Isaac and Lily remained each other's touchstone, the center around which everything else revolved. On a warm spring evening in 1902, as they approached their 25th wedding anniversary, Isaac and Lily took a walk around their property. At 66 and 64, respectively, they were still active and healthy, though Isaac's hair had gone completely silver, and Lily moved a bit slower than she once had. They walked hand in hand to the creek bed where they had first met, a walk they had taken countless times over the years, but never grew tired of. The place held so many memories now, not just of their first meeting, but of all the family picnics and quiet moments they had shared there over the decades. 25 years, Lily said, sitting down on the same rock where she had been sitting that long-ago day when Isaac had ridden up and changed her life forever. It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. Isaac sat beside her, his hand still holding hers. Best 25 years of my life, the only years that really mattered. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day? Lily asked. If you had just ridden past and left me to struggle on my own. I think about it sometimes, Isaac admitted. And it terrifies me, not just because I would have missed out on knowing you and loving you, but because I don't know what kind of man I would have become without you. You made me better, Lily. You gave me a reason to be better. You were always good, Lily said firmly. You just needed someone to see it. And you gave me something too, something I didn't even know I needed. What was that? You gave me a home, not this place, she gestured around them at the land, though I love every inch of it, but a home in your heart. A place where I belonged, where I was valued and cherished. After my father died, I felt so lost and alone. You gave me roots again. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. Finally, Isaac spoke again. I want you to know something, Lily. Every single day for the past 25 years, I have thanked God for you, for the chance to love you, to build a life with you. Whatever happens from here on out, whatever years we have left together, I want you to know that you have been the greatest blessing of my life. Lily turned to him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, the love that had never dimmed in all their years together. And you have been mine. I love you, Isaac Larson. I loved you when we were young and building our life from nothing, and I love you now, with our children grown and our grandchildren playing at our feet. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. Isaac kissed her then, a kiss that held 25 years of love and partnership, of struggles overcome and joys shared. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying happy tears. They walked back to the ranch house as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The house was lit up with lanterns, and they could see their children moving about inside, preparing for the anniversary celebration they had planned despite Isaac and Lily's protests that it was not necessary. Thomas was there with Alina and their growing brood of children. Caroline had come from town where she now lived above the expanded store that sold her preserves and baked goods. Samuel and Margaret had brought young Isaac, who at 5 years old was already showing signs of his grandfather's steady nature. As Isaac and Lily walked through the door, they were greeted with cheers and hugs. The table was laden with food that their children had prepared, and someone had even managed to acquire a bottle of real champagne from somewhere. They ate and laughed and told stories late into the night. The grandchildren fell asleep in various corners, and still the adults talked, reminiscing about memories and making plans for the future. Isaac sat at the head of the table, Lily beside him, and looked around at the family they had created, the legacy they were leaving, and felt a contentment so deep it almost hurt. "Thank you," he said suddenly, raising his glass. Everyone quieted and turned to look at him. "Thank you all for being here, for being who you are. Your mother and I built this ranch from almost nothing, but our real achievement is this family. Each of you has made us proud in ways we never imagined. We love you all more than words can say." "To Ma and Pa," Thomas said, raising his own glass. "To 25 years of showing us what real love looks like, what real partnership means. Everything we are, we owe to you both." They all drank, and then Caroline stood up. "I want to say something too. Ma, Pa, you taught us that hard work and honesty matter, that family comes first, and that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every single day. Thank you for choosing each other, because that choice gave us all this." She gestured around the room at her siblings and their families. Samuel, never one for big speeches, simply said, "Thank you for supporting my dreams, even when they were different from what you might have expected. And thank you for showing me that education comes in many forms. Some of the most important lessons I have ever learned, I learned right here on this ranch." Lily was openly weeping now, and Isaac had to clear his throat several times before he could speak. "We are the lucky ones," he managed finally. "To have children like you, to have been blessed with this life. We couldn't be more grateful or more proud." The celebration continued until well past midnight, and when everyone finally left or found places to sleep scattered throughout the house, Isaac and Lily made their way to their bedroom. They were exhausted but happy, filled with the warmth of family and love. As they got ready for bed, Lily caught sight of herself in the mirror. She saw a woman in her 60s, with lines around her eyes and gray in her hair, so different from the frightened young widow Isaac had first met at the creek bed. But when Isaac came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder, she also saw a woman who was deeply loved, who had built a good life, who had no regrets. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "I am thinking about that girl I used to be, so scared and alone, trying to manage on her own. I wish I could tell her that everything was going to be all right, better than all right. That a kind cowboy was going to stop and help her, and that simple act of kindness was going to change her whole life. I wish I could tell that young cowboy that the lonely woman he met at the creek bed was going to become his whole world," Isaac said softly. "That she would give him everything he had ever dreamed of, and things he hadn't even known to dream about." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other and looking at their reflection, seeing not just who they were now but all the years and experiences that had brought them to this moment. Finally, they climbed into bed, and as they had done for 25 years, they fell asleep in each other's arms, grateful for another day together and hopeful for all the days still to come. The years that followed were gentler, slower. Isaac gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to Thomas, though he still rode out most days to check on things and offer advice. Lily scaled back her preserves business, teaching Caroline the recipes and methods she had perfected over decades. They had more time now for the things they enjoyed, for reading together in the evenings, for taking long walks, for playing with their growing collection of grandchildren. In 1907, they celebrated their 30th anniversary quietly, just the two of them, with a simple dinner at home and a walk to their special spot by the creek bed. They were slower now, Isaac at 71 and Lily at 69, but they still held hands and still found joy in each other's company. 30 years. Isaac marveled as they sat on their rock, watching the sunset paint the sky in those familiar shades of orange and pink. Sometimes it feels like 3. Time moves differently when you're happy, Lily said. The days are long but the years are short. You have any regrets? Isaac asked. Anything you wish we had done differently? Lily thought about this seriously before answering. No, she finally said. Not a single one. We had challenges, certainly, and moments that were difficult, but I wouldn't change any of it because it all led us here to this moment, to this life we have built together. Me either, Isaac agreed, though I do wish I had met you sooner. I wish we had had even more years together. We have had exactly the years we were meant to have, Lily said, and we will have whatever years are still ahead of us. That's enough for me. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, neither in any hurry to return home. These moments, just the two of them in the place where their story had begun, were precious and rare now with their busy family and the demands of the ranch. Lily, Isaac said eventually. Yes. If I could go back and live my whole life over again, I wouldn't change a single moment. Every hardship, every lonely night before I met you, every challenge we faced together, it was all worth it to end up here with you. Lily squeezed his hand. That's the most beautiful thing you have ever said to me. I mean every word. As they walked back to the ranch house, moving slowly in deference to their aging bodies, they could see lights glowing warmly in the windows. Their home, the home they had built together, filled with memories and love. Tomorrow there would be work to do, grandchildren to play with, a ranch to help manage. But tonight, there was just this. Two people who had found each other through an act of simple kindness and had spent 30 years building a life on that foundation. Isaac held the door open for Lily, and as she passed him, he caught her hand and pulled her back for a kiss. I love you, Lily Larson, he said. I love you too, Isaac Larson, she replied. Always and forever. They went inside together, closing the door on the night and the memories, ready to face whatever tomorrow brought, knowing they would face it together, as they had faced everything for the past 30 years. Their story, which had begun with firewood and kindness, had become a legacy of love that would endure through generations, a testament to the power of compassion, partnership, and unwavering devotion. And as they settled into their home for the night, neither of them could have asked for anything more than what they had found in each other, a love that had started with a simple act of chopping extra firewood and had grown into something beautiful, lasting, and true.